Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 972 for October 2nd, 2022. Coming to you live from the Whisky Show in London. We'll have highlights from the weekend coming up on WhiskyCast In-Depth, along with the What I'm Tasting This Week department, your voice, behind the label, and much more. All on this week's WhiskyCast.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Ever wondered where Redbreast got its name? Well, let's go back to 1912 and be glad our bird-watching founder didn't spot the bar-tailed godwit that day.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Gabriel Cardarella here with Dewar's Whiskey, inviting you to enjoy this episode of WhiskyCast with a glass of Dewar's, the most awarded blended Scotch whiskey in history.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. Kentucky's population is growing, but there are still more barrels of bourbon than people in the bluegrass state. New data released this week by the State Revenue Department shows 11.4 million barrels of bourbon were maturing in Kentucky's rickhouses on January 1st, when distillers have to file an annual inventory report with the state. Add in the rye and other distilled spirits, and the total rises to nearly 12 million barrels. While that's good news, Kentucky Distillers Association President Eric Gregory says it is a mixed bag for the industry.
We're paying $40 million in barrel taxes this year, which is also another historical record, and that's $7 million more than last year, which is a tremendous jump. So this is an issue that we've got to address here soon.
Now, we've talked before about the barrel tax issue. What's being done now to try to address it, since the distillers are paying more in barrel taxes than they can take credits against their state income taxes with?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Mark. So the legislature formed a barrel taxation task force. Try to say that 5 times fast. And they've been meeting each month and taking stakeholder feedback. And we really like that process because it's been very open and objective and just a really good free flow of information. And we started out just getting all the numbers on the table so everybody could agree with them. And then, a lot of the community groups have come in and talked about those because the barrel taxes do generate a lot of important revenue for local programs. No doubt about it. Education, fire districts, public safety, public health, things like that. So the trick has been always to how do you eliminate this tax and minimize the impact on local communities. So they've been taking testimony for the past few months, and at the meeting last Friday, they said that that's going to wrap it up from kind of just the testimony now, and for the next few meetings, we're going to focus on solutions.
Distillers are also allowed to carry over unused tax credits from year to year, and Gregory says the total amount of outstanding credits could be as high as $100 million. So it's not just as easy as doing away with the barrel tax altogether. Also on the political front, one of the distilling industry's giants is pulling out of the U.S. industry's leading trade group. Politico reported this week that Diageo will leave the Distilled Spirits Council at the end of the year. The announcement comes a week after the Council's annual public policy conference in Washington. Diageo's annual dues to Discus made up a significant portion of the trade group's budget each year, and that's leaving Discus CEO Chris Swanger looking at all options for making up the expected shortfall next year.
Clearly very disappointed. Great things for Diageo. Diageo's played a leading role in support of Discus for many, many years and deserves a lot of credit. We are appreciative and excited that they'll continue to remain fully active with responsibility.org. So disappointed, no doubt about it, but appreciate and respect Diageo's decision. Discus has significantly expanded membership over the last couple of years in our efforts to unite the U.S. distilled spirits industry. We have expanded our ability in alternative revenue as well, and all in an effort to make sure that Discus is on point, being the great industry advocate that it's always been. So Despite the news, we appreciate and respect Diageo's decision.
In a statement to Politico, Diageo executives said there was no disagreement with Discus that caused the move. The company plans to refocus its spending on internal advocacy initiatives. In other news, Tomatin took home top honors at the International Wine and Spirits Competition Awards Thursday night, winning both Scotch Whisky Producer of the Year and Spirits Producer of the Year trophies. We'll have more on that later on. Redbreast took home the Worldwide Whiskey Maker of the Year award, and some guy from New Jersey won the Spirits Communicator trophy. Highland Park Distillery should be back in operation within the next few weeks. Work is almost complete on repairs to damage caused back in May when a too-tall truck took out pipes and electrical wiring that connected the distillery to its warehouses across the road. We have word now of a couple of switcheroos. For instance, Whistle Pig has been a rye whiskey for its entire lifetime, but now the Vermont distillery is releasing its first bourbon. I talked with Whistle Pig's Liz Rhodes here in London.
It's kind of our yin to our yang, if you will. So we're super excited to kind of move outside of the realm of rye whiskey, which of course we're 100% super passionate about, but we're kind of stepping into a different way. So the bourbon we just launched, so it is 100 proof, available just in the States. However, just launched about a month ago, so we're really excited about it.
Isn't this sort of a big jump for you guys to get away from out of the comfort zone that rye has been for Whistle Pig?
I think it's about growth and about kind of saying, even though we're passionate about our rye, we're passionate about other whiskeys as well. So we kind of wanted to join the conversation of bourbon as well and just kind of see where it takes us.
And Uncle Nearest Tennessee Whiskey is adding a rye whiskey to its range. Master blender Victoria Edie Butler is here in London this weekend as well.
It is uncut, unfiltered, and it is a distillery exclusive. So you'll have to come to Shelbyville, Tennessee, to the nearest green distillery to get it, but it is absolutely phenomenal.
And you didn't bring a drop of it with you?
Unfortunately, I didn't bring a drop of it with me.
Victoria, come on.
I know. I got in trouble with Matt as soon as I got here. It's really good. It is really good. It's 118.4 proof. It's delicious.
The Uncle Nearest rye is sourced from Canada and matured for 4 years in New York before being taken to Tennessee for final maturation and bottling. It'll carry a price tag of $149 a bottle at the distillery. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com and on our social media timelines. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Time now for the WhiskyCast calendar of events brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distilling. The Great American Whiskey Fair is this Friday night in Columbia, South Carolina, followed by the Whiskey Colors Festival this weekend in Dufton, Scotland. Tickets are still available for the Whiskey Guild's annual Whiskey and Tequila Classic on October 13th in Asbury Park, New Jersey. Sagamore Spirits' final Whiskey on the Waterfront party of the year is on the 15th in Baltimore, Maryland. Whiskey and Barrel Night hits Los Angeles on the 20th, and that same night is the Los Angeles Magazine Whiskey Festival in Long Beach, California. Finally, Whiskey Fest San Francisco is on October 28th. If you're responsible for organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the searchable calendar at WhiskyCast.com. The calendar is brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distilling, makers of the Virginia Rye Whiskey. You'll find their Roundstone Rye at fine whiskey shops in 26 U.S. states, 3 continents, and online. Visit the new BuyVirginiaRye.com site for more details, and please drink responsibly.
Dewar's master blender Stephanie McLeod's innate curiosity, combined with her passion for whiskey maturation, cask finishing and blending has created some truly incredible expressions for Dewar's Scotch whiskey. It's also earned her 4 consecutive Master Blender of the Year titles at the International Whiskey Competition, making her the first person to achieve such an accolade. Her innovative spirit is the inspiration behind the ultra-premium Dewar's Double Double 32 Year, the highest-rated blended Scotch whiskey in the world with a score of 94.4. So whether you consider yourself a whiskey connoisseur or just want to find an exciting new whiskey experience, consider one of Stephanie's other masterful expressions, including Dewar's 15-year, Double Double 21-year, or Dewar's 8-year Mizunara cask finish, and discover just how rewarding curiosity can be. Enjoy responsibly.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlock and the Classic Malts lineup. Thought we'd bring you some of the interviews I did this weekend here at the Whisky Show. During the news, I mentioned Tomatin's big night Thursday at the International Wine and Spirits Competition Awards. Scott Adamson of Tomatin was still glowing when I talked with him at the Tomatin stand this weekend. You guys brought home all the hardware.
We did indeed. It was a fantastic result. In the end, we won the trophy for Scotch Whisky Producer of the Year, and then surprisingly, we didn't even know it was happening. All of the winners of the individual categories were put forward for Outstanding Spirits Producer of the Year, and we won that award. And it was only in the fallout today when Danny said, "Do you know that means that we're the best spirits producer in the world?" What an incredible thing to achieve. And it just means so much to all of the people that live and work at Tomatin, and their 3rd, 4th generations of the families to do so. So to get that recognition is incredible.
Where do you go from here?
Well, that's the difficult thing, right? You know, I mean, I think we now hopefully are able to use that to bring so many more eyes to Tomatin, and then for us it's all about getting the liquid in glass and getting as many people to see our products as possible. We know that we've got some of the best whiskey in the world. Hopefully when we win awards like this and we know that it happens, it brings more eyes to us and we get to share that quality of liquid with more and more consumers.
Tell me about this Japanese whiskey you're working on.
Yeah, we say working on. We've been working on it for 3 years now, and now it is out in the wild. So Shirakawa, the story in a nutshell, is that the distillery was opened in 1939 by Daikoku Bidoshu, who went on to open Karazawa Distillery. In 1947 it was purchased by Takara Shutso, who in 1986 bought Tomatin Distillery, so that's where the companies are linked. That distillery produced malt whisky from 1951 until 1969, so for an 18-year period, over 6 decades ago. And all of the whisky produced went into their blended whisky, King whisky, so it was never released as a single malt. The distillery would go on to be a shochu distillery for Takara Shutso. They were at the forefront of the shochu boom in Japan throughout the 70s and 80s. The distillery was subsequently closed and demolished in 2003, and so with that, a piece of Japanese whisky history was gone, and we thought that the distillery would guard its secrets forever. Over the years, the number of people that worked for Takara Shutso that were even aware that this distillery had existed dwindled. But in 2019, our managing director, Stephen, who had become fascinated by the story, was visiting Japan, and he was presented with a small sample bottle, lots of Japanese characters on it, and crucially, the number's 1958. And what transpired that we had discovered was the last parcel of Shirakawa single malt, so the only official bottling of Shirakawa ever, but being from 1958, it is the earliest vintage of Japanese whisky that has ever been bottled. So it gives us as whisky drinkers not only the only opportunity to try a Shirakawa, but the earliest glimpses into Japanese whisky production.
When's it going on sale?
It's on sale already. It was released in, I think it was September the 13th there. So it's now available. There's 1,500 bottles available worldwide.
Price is what, $25,000 a bottle?
That's right. Correct, yeah. Which, given the rarity and the thing that we talk so much about is the story, because when we discovered the whiskey, we then discovered the distillery. That name, Shirakawa, was lost forever. Nobody was aware of Shirakawa, so we discovered the story of a distillery. But more so than that, when we're talking about that, we often gloss over the fact that the liquid itself, the whiskey, is outstanding. It's some of the best whiskey I've ever had the fortune of trying, and it is a liquid time capsule. It's full of waxy, oak-driven notes, but but then there's a candied pineapple, then that lovely incense, sandalwood, cedarwood, almost ashy-like aroma. It is just a remarkable thing.
Now you're going to have to let me try it.
Yeah, well, the only public tasting we have of it is here at the Whisky Show tomorrow. We're holding a masterclass with Dave Broom, myself, and our managing director, Stephen Bremner, and we'll be tasting the Tomatin 36-year-old, 1976, 50-year-old, and of course the Shirakawa, 1958. So we have it here on the stand for people to see, but we don't have samples of it here.
The Whisky Show brings all sorts of people to London, including Chris Fletcher and Lexi Phillips from Jack Daniels. How are you guys doing?
We're fantastic. How are you?
Okay. How was the trip, first of all, to Paris?
Oh, my gosh. It was absolutely amazing. Being my first time over, it was an absolutely awesome experience. Also, my first whiskey live show, so pretty fun to experience that.
And this is, as you said, the first real live show you guys have been to in Europe in 2-3 years now, right?
Yeah, that's right. First one since the pandemic. So it's. I was telling somebody earlier, our product, we like to think it brings people together, and it's always better to be face to face than through a screen. And so it's really nice to reconnect and see old friends and make new friends. So it's great to be back.
How important is the UK market for Jack Daniels?
Actually, the UK is the number one market outside of the US. So that's pretty darn important, I guess.
What about the rest of Europe?
Yeah, I mean, you've got also Germany, Poland, France, also really big markets, Spain as well. So, really, if you think about it, it's not only a big portion of our business now, it's also growing really well. So we're selling more Jack Daniels outside the U.S. than we do inside the U.S. now. So it's amazing the international growth, and it's amazing how people connect to the whiskey that we make back in Lynchburg.
What have you learned on this trip, Lexi?
I've learned a little bit of French and a little bit of Spanish, but I've learned that this market is, Miss Whisky Show has a lot of Scotch in there, so it takes a little more explaining on how we make our whiskey since the processes are quite different.
I saw you guys running through the show floor earlier. Did you taste anything different?
Have not, just kind of checking out who all's here. Pretty Scotch dominated.
You taste anything unusual?
I haven't tasted a lot. We were only here for a minute yesterday, and I'm getting ready to go on stage now. But we try to walk around and at least check out and see what, other people are doing. It's always fun and interesting. But really, we're focused on our triple mash bottle and bond and our bonded, obviously, bottle and bond Tennessee whiskey. So that's been the focus, and it's been really, really well received. So we're excited for the future.
Those were good whiskeys.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thanks for taking the time, Chris Fletcher and Lexi Phillips from Jack Daniels. We'll talk to you guys again soon. We've mentioned the deal Elixir Distillers has to buy the Tormore Distillery from Chivas Brothers. It is taking some time to close the deal and get all of the licenses transferred, but blender Oliver Chilton of Elixir Distillers has already been researching what he'll have to work with once the deal closes.
Impatient, I guess, is where you end up. It's taken probably a lot longer than we'd hoped, mainly to do with HMRC and regulation changes over the last 2-3 years. And also, coronavirus still plays a role. You ask HMRC, so the government here, and I'll say everything's backlogged for 3-4 months. So there's a bit of a wait. We're very lucky. The guys at Chivas have been incredibly friendly, incredibly welcoming. So we've been on site quite a bit. We've been in the warehouses, but we haven't yet been allowed to go and open any casks. We can just look at them and stroke the outside. The good thing is the wood quality is fantastic, which is what we'd expect from Chivas. They've always filled great wood, and you can see that when you're walking around the warehouses. So pretty excited, but yeah, getting very impatient to get in and get working.
When do you think you'll actually be able to close on the deal and get in there?
So at the moment it's looking like it will be December or January. We'll probably time it with Christmas shutdown so that we're taking over once all the work's been completed. So yeah, it should be around then. And then it will be another, it'll be at least a year's worth of work of putting stuff together from a liquid point of view. We've got a lot of work to do from cleaning up the distillery and moving things around. It's a factory at the moment. That's what it's been making whiskey for blends, and it makes fantastic spirit. But we probably need to move things around to make it for visitors, make it a more friendly experience. At the moment, you can see how they just expanded. If you open a door at Tormore at the moment, you find a washback. That's basically every room clock tower, washbacks, boiler house washbacks. So there's going to be a lot of movement on that side and getting things a bit more tidy. But the space is incredible. The building's incredible. And you can see when they built it in 1960, they planned for people to visit. They planned for people to drink single malt whiskey there, which is really exciting. It's really exciting to basically continue that journey that was started like 50 years ago.
You're excited about this, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. So Sakina and I were talking the other day. We're really lucky. As a company, we've managed to touch every part of the whiskey industry. We've been retailers, wholesalers, obviously bottlers and blenders and distributors. So we've done everything we think there is to do in the whiskey business, apart from make spirit. So to think that we'll be able to make spirit for the first time in January, which is a lot earlier than we were anticipating with Islay, because Islay is taking its time. It's really exciting. It's really exciting to think you can help steer a spirit in a direction and make something new.
How are things going with the distillery on Islay?
Slowly they're going. Groundworks are complete. We'll be starting all the foundations. We're waiting for some of the workers to finish at Port Ellen because we use similar contractors across the sites. So there's a bit of lag there. But we're still on track to hopefully run the stills in 2024, which has been our plan for the last year. So, it's a really big site, Mark. I can't... unless you're standing on it, you don't realise just how much there is to do. I think doing the floor maltings, which is fantastic. For us, longevity is essential. There's a real pressure on Islay with the maltings at the moment, so it gives us a bit of freedom. But space-wise, it's huge. And then in terms of the production process, we very much went with make the biggest distillery you can to make the smallest amount of liquid, so that you've got space to play, so you can go for longer ferments, so you've got time and to make the best spirit you possibly can. But that all means lots of infrastructure, lots of washbacks. I think 14 washbacks for 1 million litres, which will be a bit over the top, but I think George is very happy because it gives her flexibility.
And that gives you room to expand down the road.
Actually not the plan. If we went to expand, we would probably have to increase the size of the site. For us, it's all about creating different liquid styles, and we're whiskey enthusiasts, whiskey geeks. That's our background. Whiskey historians. We research old bottles. We look at the production process in history, and you can see how the process has changed. So, as much as making lots of liquid is important because people want to drink more whiskey, actually, for us, the most important thing is make the best quality spirit we can. And if that reduces down the amount we can sell, then that's the way we'll go. We're under no pressure. So luckily, still no pressure.
Thanks, Oliver. The Whisky Show is my annual chance to catch up with old friends like Colin Dunn of Diageo, who's getting ready to retire next month. I asked him to give us the details on this year's special releases unveiled this week.
Well, the best thing about this year's special releases is we're trying to make all of these 8 expressions accessible at a price that's not going to be too hard on the pocket. The days of picking up Port Ellen for £100 and a Brora for $250, sadly, those days are gone. But within Diageo's portfolio, they've got some amazing distilleries that are producing some liquids that don't get the publicity that they should do. Remember, Diageo is a blending company that also produces single malts. And what stands out this year with the range that we've got is that the majority of them, at least 4 or 5 of them, experiments have been done by the master blenders to create whiskey from known distilleries and slightly unknown distilleries. The word this year is finishing. We're experimenting with a second maturation to see how different a liquid that can be produced. We call them elusive expressions. Bottom line, we've got whiskies like Cameron Bridge, not that well known. It's actually the main component from a grain perspective in all of our blends, like Johnny Walker. We've got a 26-year-old Cameron Bridge from Refill American Casks. This one has just been kept with straight and no chaser, so there's no second maturation. It's just the oldest expression of Cameron Bridge that we've released. Now, if any of you are fans of grain whiskey, as I am, we've released some absolutely top-drawer grains in the past. Cambus 40, Carsbridge 48, Port Dundas 52, Caledonian 40. All of these are exquisite, aesthetically put together grain whiskies of the highest caliber. And I'm not saying that as a Diageo ambassador. I'm saying that as a whiskey lover. They are probably the best value aged statement whiskies out there on the market today. So this 26-year-old joins that wonderful thong of grain whiskies that we're able to offer to the customer. Oban, which is a big fan in America, with that lovely spicy, salty note to it. We export near nigh on 90% of Oban to the US of A. This time, we've given it extra mid-palate weight, extra texture by maturing it for a further period, which is undisclosed, I'm guessing at about 6 months, but that's my words, where Oban has been put into Amontillado casks, giving an added touch of nuttiness to that salty, dry, tannic note that makes you want to have some great nibbles with Oban. That's of course just one of the 8. Another one to mention is, if it ain't broke, why fix it? We've got a stunning 12-year-old Lagavulin, which is sweeter and more peatier than any Lagavulin 12-year-old that I've tasted in the last 20 years. We've got a great Talisker that's, if you look at Talisker 20 years ago, we had a 10-year-old. Now we've got 12 different expressions of Talisker. We played around with rum casks. This year, we've chosen one that's got the most peated casks of Talisker in the warehouse, released at cask strength. If you're a Talisker lover and you like that red hot chili pepper kick, this one may be one worth getting your hands on. I'm just going to refresh myself with the others, as I've been caught with my trousers down, so to speak, at the Whisky Show. Bear with me.
As he looks at the book that has a bunch of cocktail recipes for these whiskeys that can all be served neat, but that, as Colin is looking through these, we're sipping on some Mortlock 21-year-old here, and I'm letting Colin, I'm vamping for a second while Colin does this.
We've got a really good expression from Cardu. Cardu, some of you may know, Cardu is a Mediterranean whiskey. The majority of sales of Cardu is in Spain, Greece, Italy. Here, we've transferred Cardu into Jamaican pot still rum casks. The Talisker this year is an 11-year-old Talisker. What's amazing is, in our range at the moment, I remember when I first went to Talisker in 1988, when the classic malts were first released, and the distillery manager at the time, he said to me, Talisker doesn't mature well. It should be drunk young. It should be drunk at around about 8 years of age, which blew me away, because now, with cask management playing a major part in the way whiskey is promoted, we've now put out on sale to the public excuse me, a Talisker 41, 43 and 44-year-old. It does age well, but if you want to taste full-on red hot chili pepper, I never say Talisker is peaty, I say it's peppery, and that peppery note for me allows me to use Talisker in food pairings and served up in so many different ways. My favourite in London is picking up half a dozen North Atlantic oysters. I carry around Talisker in an atomizer, and I just drizzle Talisker, that peppery note, over the North Atlantic oysters, which are salty, and they go together so well. So I have more fun with Talisker than any of the other malt whiskies in our portfolio. I should also mention, finally, we've got around to releasing a Klein Leash. Now, Klein Leash over the last 20 years, the best Clyneliches were to be found in independent bottlings. We never went beyond a distiller's edition Clynelish and a 14-year-old expression. This year, we've got a 12-year-old Clynelish which has been aged all of its life in Pedro Jimenez and Oloroso casks. Now, normally, if you've been lucky enough to savour those two sherries in whiskey, it gives the whiskey a lot more weight. It becomes almost like a liqueur whiskey, thick and rich and viscous. Here, the casks of PX and Oloroso, I believe, are second or third fill, so that the impact is not quite as much as previous expressions of Clynelish in those casks. It's a great welcome addition, and it shows that minerally freshness, that manzanilla of the north, as it used to be called. Here, it's taken on just a little bit more weight. And finally, I should mention that we've got a great expression of a wonder of modern times, the Singleton, known in America, Asia and Europe. 3 different distilleries, Glendullan, Dufton and Glenord, all going under the Singleton banner, which last year shifted 650,000 cases. Phenomenal. This year we have a Singleton of Glenord at 15 years of age. And I'm going to be completely honest with Mark, because I don't have the information close at hand and I've not done my homework. I can't remember the finish and I don't have the bottle, so smacked wrist for me. And I hope my very bad excuse is acceptable to all of you viewers listening.
You're forgiven for this one. You're getting ready to essentially retire and go into consulting in a few weeks. What's been your best memory of the whiskey business so far?
The best memory I can tell all the listeners and Mark here is the day that I met Jim McEwen, who converted me from being a wine ambassador to leave that profession and become a whiskey ambassador. I booked Jim to do a tasting in England, and he said to me, "What is your favourite whiskey?" And within his portfolio, at the time he was with Bamur, and I said to him, "The 17-year-old is the one that floats my boat." He goes, "Well, tonight you're going to stand on stage in front of 200 people and tell people what you think of Bowmore 17. And I said, "I don't do public speaking. It scares the living daylights out of me." And he said, "Listen, are you a whiskey man or not?" And I said, "Yes." He goes, "Well, you're going to get up on stage tonight, and if you dry up, I will support you." 3 months later, I was made Bamor's first ever whiskey ambassador in the UK, and I've never looked back. And at every opportunity, I tell people that Jim McEwen was the reason I'm in the whiskey industry, and still today, listening, when I can, words of wisdom from the ex-Bamor, Bruichladdich, Ardnahoe, the master distiller, Jim McEwen. Check him out on YouTube.
Or check him out on WhiskyCast as well. We've had a bunch of interviews with Jim over the years. Has the role changed for you over the last 10 years or so as we move into a new age of whiskey?
I think like anything in life, organically, life always changes. And 25 years ago, when I first delved into the whiskey industry, whiskey was being drunk mainly by the more mature person. And it was drunk one way, neat. But now, in 2022, whiskey is being drunk in many different ways. It's being drunk in cocktails. We're taking on cocktail bartenders who are able to, like an illustration to a book, take whiskey to another level. We have chefs now that we work with within in-house, whereby we are food pairing whiskey. Some of the food pairings that chefs who are purveyors of taste are creating some wonderful food and whiskey pairings. Also, you have the strange, weird scenario where we have people who invest in whiskey without tasting it. When I started in the whiskey industry, we never talked about investing. We maybe talked about buying two, drinking one, and drinking the other one in a couple of years. But now, investors are changing the face at the top end of whiskey appreciation. It's become like wine. Nowadays, a lot of young people are not saving Rolexes or vintage cars or fine wine. They're collecting fine whiskey. And this has now become part of everyday life in the whiskey world, and I can only see it getting bigger over the next couple of years.
To me, that's a sad thing almost, because this stuff was meant to be drunk, wasn't it?
This thing was virtually invented in farms, where if they had some leftover barley, they would distill it to make aquavita. And now it's become a global liquid that's dissected, shared, but not enough. The expensive whiskies that I was able to drink 10 years ago, 20 years ago, the Black Bamors of the day, they are now out of our reach. If anything, the challenge is for any aspiring would-be or new converts to whiskey, befriend your local bartender. Go to whiskey festivals. Listen to what the people behind their respective counters has to say. Try to get your palate to like a myriad of flavours, like in wine. I drink red wine in the winter. I drink white wine in the summer. I drink Lagavulin in the winter. I drink Cardew in the summer. Have a broad variety of liquids, of whiskies to choose from. There is so much out there. I'm just talking about Scotch, let alone some of the stuff that's coming out from around the world these days. You know, people who listen to Whiskey Cask will be fully aware, with the different people that Mark has on, there's a veritable cornucopia of taste and flavour that is happening in the whiskey world. That's the major plus that's happening for me. Innovation is alive and well. My hashtag has always been, though, whiskey is a conversation to be shared with like-minded people and to be able to appreciate, loosen the tongue, spread your vocabulary, and enjoy whiskey as it should be done, to be drunk with friends.
And Colin, the conversations will go on. Thank you for so many years of service to the whiskey industry, and Slán Siobhan, my friend.
And long may you last. I expect to be listening to you for at least another 20 years. I hit the age of 70 next month, which means I've only got 35 left. I will make good use of that time, listening to Whiskey Cast, sharing stories, sharing drams, and meeting the general public from all walks of life.
And we wish Colin all the best in his retirement. He won't be going away completely. He will still be doing some consulting work for Diageo. That's WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Mortlach, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlach lineup at malts.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. Let's start off with the Compass Box Ultramarine, the brand new release. It's a blended Scotch bottled at 51% ABV that's designed to resemble the blended Scotches of the 80s and 90s. The nose is light and floral with notes of fresh-cut grass, honey, vanilla, and a hint of citrus. The taste is fruity and floral with grapefruit, melons, a touch of white pepper, and honey. The finish has crisp green apples, lingering hints of grapefruit. It's a very complex dram. I'm scoring the Compass Box Ultramarine a 93. Now, the folks at Dunn Distillery in Scotland and Bimber Distillery in London are financing their new distillery in Scotland with a series of independent bottlings under the Davao Way label. Let's try their Orkney single malt. It's from Highland Park and bottled at 17 years of age at 60.3% ABV. The nose has peat smoke on it, along with creosote, heather, honey, and fresh berries. The taste is peaty and peppery with a lot of heather, honey, and licorice notes underneath. The finish, long and smoky. I'm scoring the Davao Way's Orkney single malt a 90. The Tamdhu cigar malt is also brand new. It's matured in first fill European oak sherry casks and bottled at 53.8% ABV. The nose has notes of toffee, honey, and figs. There's a toffee sweetness on the taste, balanced by a soft oakiness and touches of honey, hints of figs and dates, and a subtle bit of orange. The finish turns spicy with white pepper and toffee. It's a nice dram that doesn't require a cigar to enjoy. I'm scoring it a 93. I'll have more tasting notes in just a minute, but first, this week's tasting notes are brought to you by Sagamore Spirit, a 100-time award-winning Maryland-style rye whiskey. With a determined focus to create the best rye whiskey imaginable, their team of distillers crafts each spirit with a nod to both tradition and innovation. Find their signature double oak, cask strength, or reserve series of ryes, as well as their line of premium rye whiskey canned cocktails at a retailer near you. Just visit sagamorespirit.com/find-rye. Please drink responsibly. We heard from Scott Adamson about the Tomatin win at the International Wine and Spirits Competition Awards during the WhiskyCast In-Depth segment. I had a chance to try their 125th anniversary 50-year-old Tomatin. It's bottled at 44% ABV. The nose has notes of melon and tropical fruits along with dried flowers and honey. Very subtle and complex on the nose. The taste is fruity and vibrant, though, with tropical fruits, grapefruit. It's a bit herbaceous as well, with notes of honey, vanilla, toasted oak, and just a whiff of smoke. The finish is long and fruity with a gentle whiff of smoke and toasted oak. I'm scoring the Tomatin 50-year-old a 95. Finally, let's look at the Fettercairn 18-year-old we mentioned last week during the news. This one is finished in Scottish oak, and it's bottled at 46.8% ABV. The nose has tropical fruits on the nose, along with honey, vanilla, apples, pineapple, and hints of mango and papaya. The taste is vibrant and fruity with a hint of cinnamon bark, mango, papaya, guava fruits, vanilla, and honey. The finish is long and luscious. I'm scoring it a 93. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of more than 3,400 whiskeys from around the world. Check it out this week at whiskycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Kentucky and Ireland have plenty in common. Two homes of horse racing. Bluegrass music is said to have Irish roots. Okay, it's not the longest list, but the Redbreast Kentucky Oak Edition only strengthens the bond. Finished in sustainably sourced Kentucky oak for a captivating nose and round taste. I see a triple crown in this thoroughbred's future.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Time now for Your Voice, presented by Scarabus Isla Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. Instead of opening up the inbox this week and reading emails, I thought it would be good to hear from some of the people who turned out for the Whisky Show. Let me get your name again.
Graham Ward.
We were talking on the way over about expectations for the show. What were your expectations, and have they been met so far?
I think they have been met largely. Obviously, it becomes a bit of a haze late afternoon, but I think earlier on, it's certainly... One or two, we talked about some of the older drams. We used to get a lot more older drams at shows, which you don't get now, but obviously that's a sign of the times and where whiskey's going to, I think.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I'd say there's a lot of good young distilleries as well. So you've got, in England, you've got some new distilleries which are opening at White Peak and Cotswolds and places like that, which are producing very good whiskey at 3, 4, 5 years old. So I think it's a good thing we're being pushed in a different direction.
Where do you see things 5 years from now? More of the same?
I think there's going to be a problem in the market. I think certainly in the UK and probably throughout Europe, talking to my Dutch colleagues and friends, that we seem to be hitting some serious financial problems within families with the price of gas going up, the price of electricity going up, things like that. Mortgage rates are going up, so I think there'll be a squeeze on income that's available to buy whiskies going forward.
I'm talking with Peter Hosek from the Czech Republic, and this is your first Whisky Show, right?
This is my first visit to this Whisky Show. I'm impressed. Yesterday was my first day, dedicated to masterclasses, and today I go just around the stands to meet all the people.
Has it met your expectations so far?
Absolutely. I mean, I fulfilled my, I would call the whiskey childhood dream. I had a masterclass with David Stewart. For me, David is the Mr. Single Malt. He's the guy who created a category, in my opinion, and thanks to him, we are all here today. Most of them single malts on the booth here, so it was fantastic.
What's the best dram you've had so far?
What I loved was actually at this masterclass, the second red rose, the red wine finish. It was a very nice one. And there was one under the bar, Malt and Madness. I cannot say which one because it didn't have even a label.
Thank you, Peter. It's good to see you.
Mark, enjoy it.
Okay, let me get your name.
It's Claire.
Claire what?
Claire Vokins.
What's been your expectations of the show, and has it been met?
So last year when we had the show, it was quite quiet. It was the industry coming back together and getting over the pandemic and being able to have a show again. I've expected it to be busier this year. I expected it to be a little bit hectic with the people coming in, and actually everyone's been lovely. There's been no major issues. It's been nice and busy. Upstairs especially has been busy. It's very, very hot. We've had a lot of people trying our whiskey. We do Swedish whiskey, Macmira. They come up with an expectation of, well, this isn't Scotch. Tell me more about it. Am I actually going to like it? And they do. It's a very different vibe to Scotch whiskey. It's a lot more relaxed, a little bit more mellow. And they do walk away quite happy. So, yeah.
So it's met your expectations and then some?
Oh, God, yeah. It's been a really lovely show, actually. Everyone, like I say, sometimes it can get a bit fraught on these shows. There's alcohol involved, obviously, and there's certain pinch points where you might get a little bit of an uptake of people being a little bit more aggressive. But no, this year up here in my experience, been much calmer, much quieter. So in a weird way, it hasn't met my expectations of being hard work, but it's given me new expectations that going forward, these shows are going to be much nicer to be working in.
If you have a question, suggestion, or anything else you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, you can always find me on social media. Look for WhiskyCast on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or just email me. The address is comments@whiskycast.com. Your Voice is presented by Scarabus, the Islay single malt from Hunter Lang & Company that celebrates all of Islay's natural gifts in one bottle. Only those who seek shall find Scarabus. Start your search at hunterlang.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. It's brought to you by Writer's Tears. Our conversation on last week's Happy Hour webcast with Dewar's Master Blender Stephanie McLeod generated some interest in older casks, specifically the rejuvenated ones that have already been used several times. Dolph in Edmonton, Alberta, posted a comment on our YouTube page. Is there a reason that we're referring to STR casks as dechar rechar? Well, the two techniques are similar, but there's a big difference. Here's how Stephanie explained the dechar rechar process.
So in Scotland, we like to use casks a number of times because you can still get a lot out of a cask. You can't, we don't just use them once and then, move them on. We use them a few times. But rejuvenation is when you scrape off the inside surface and then set it on fire to create another char layer. Now, this doesn't take it back to being a new cask, but it does give it another lease of life. And so that's what a dechar rechar cask is.
On the other hand, the late Dr. Jim Swan created the STR process of shaving, toasting, and recharring barrels for his clients. It's used on wine casks, and the combination of toasting and charring the remaining wine in those casks caramelizes the sugars while maintaining some of the wine's flavor. Rejuvenated whiskey casks do not go through the toasting process. As Stephanie said, the idea is to just expose a fresh layer of charred oak to give the barrel a longer lifespan. Dolph, thanks for your question. And if you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just use the contact form at whiskycast.com to get in touch with us. Behind the Label is brought to you by Writer's Tears.
Writer's Tears Copperpot, an 18th century style of premium Irish whiskey, blended from single pot still and single malt. Like yourself, it's one of life's treasured rarities, and what's rare is wonderful. Writer's Tears Copperpot.
That's all for this edition of Whiskey Cast. Support for our coverage from London this week was provided by Dewar's and the Dalmore. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
Well, folks, we're nearing the end of another great episode of Whiskey Cast, which means you're probably craving some whiskey. Head on over to Dewar's.com or your local retailer to discover what makes Dewar's the most awarded blended Scotch whiskey in the world.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
You know, people always ask me, does Redbreast go better with ice or without? Would it go well with figs, dark chocolate, apple crumble? Is there one particular thing I should enjoy it with? I tell them, yeah, other people.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2022, and usually comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. But this time around, we're in London at the Whisky Show 2022. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.